as spirals of white, circling slower and deeper spirals of turquoise and aquamarine. We see the moon's rotations around this world, flowing streams of liquid light, continuous to our slower sight, woven spirals of Earth and Moon, sailing around and around the rainbow spirals of this nearest star. Your sun is no stationary light, but rides swiftly with its swirling worlds, through a moving arm of a spiral galaxy, that itself sails through an endlessly expanding spatial sea. Threads of Earthlight, moonlight, and starlight weave the finely textured fabric of this galactic arm, interwoven here and there with tracings of another and eternal light, trails of a presence passing, drawing with them into the future, the beauty, the majesty, the pageantry of unfolding creation. We feel in this fabric, in the passage of these millennia, the steady splashing of waves, the pulse of rising tides and tides withdrawn. The tides of time that ripple through the intergalactic ocean of space were not invented by the Maya, who merely observed, noted, and recorded them. As our present wave of consciousness washes highest upon the shore of this world toward the winter solstice of the year AD 2011, a great cycle, composed of many 5,125-year cycles, will culminate. The new season that dawns then as the days of the southern latitudes shorten and the northern pole moves toward its months of sunlight, will be more than the season of a single year. One knows in advance the hour when the moon will be full, but no one can anticipate the pattern of clouds on the hour of that day, the nature of the jet stream, how the wind may be tossing the waves, at just what moment the moon will break through the clouds, or just what the moonlight will reveal. These dates foretold by the inhabitants of the Yucatan, some 25 centuries ago, do not speak of how you, in human form, will deal with the new energies that are even now engulfing your world. They speak rather of the time when this Earth, and the star systems through which she makes her spiral dance, will move together into a new galactic field, a field that like a beam radiates forth from the center of this universal envelope. As your solar system moves into this new field of space, the channel that allows the Creator's awareness to reach you, comes into perfect alignment. A moment is coming, after which nothing will ever again be thought of as it was before, a meta-historical moment, an event simultaneously Alpha and Omega, to your species and to all your species had ever known. Here will begin a new season of the universe, for the tide, which only turns with the culmination of many great cycles, will turn then to begin its slow and patient return to the eternal sea where all awareness is, before branching into these streams, these harmonies that coalesce the worlds. Our race of angelic messengers was ordained at the inception of the human project to awaken you when the time was right. Some of us awaken you from the outside, shaking you, and reminding you of who you are. Some of us slide down into physicality, merging our biogravitational fields with yours, awakening within you, looking through your eyes, helping you to reprioritize your lives along the creative currents of love. Still others of our more distant kin, assist entirely from the outside, by pouring into the fields of thought and emotion around the earth, powerful energies of love, joy, and well-being. These are the spirits who will never incarnate in human form, those of truly extraterrestrial designation. They are not associated with biological processes and never will be. Yet for love of the great being who awakens within you, they come to this world as forces of stabilization, beacons of tranquility, to radiate peace and assurance into this sphere during your decades of awakening. Throughout these decades, those of us in all three capacities continuously wash the slumbering facets of human thought with the purifying currents of life information. We vitalize you with the renewing energies of eternal love. We help you to roll away the stony conceptions that have prevented the springs of perennial wisdom from bubbling up within you. It has taken those of us in our particular light circle, many human walks upon the earth, to learn your languages and to familiarize ourselves with your terrestrial imagery. But as we have needed this time to discover the most effective means of reaching through to you, with reminders of your purpose, your cultures have needed this time to expand their understanding of reality. And you too have needed this time to reclaim enough of your native intelligence to understand our communications. Cultural understanding remains minuscule in real terms, but at least now it acknowledges the universal context in which your race exists. Throughout its history, your race has labored under successive brands of illusion born of isolated egoic thought. Since these illusions were linguistically enforced in reality, descriptions that had no room for our awareness, descriptions that denied our very existence, there were few occasions when our educational currents permitted direct communication with individuals. Since so few had the ability to perceive us, for thousands of years, our only means of communication with the totality of your incarnate being was to speak to the human races and nations through their historical processes. We focused on the gradual development of collective human values, working always to shift human interest from fear-centered thought and activity to thought and activity centered in love. 20,000 years ago we began a cycle of education, centered around the spirits of trees and animals. As successive waves of reinforcement came to help us from throughout the galaxies, we were gradually able to attempt more. 10,000 years ago, we initiated a higher cycle of education based on the mystery of the seed, the fertility of beasts, and the cycles of the moon. As our reinforcements came at increasingly frequent intervals, we worked together to improve our approach and to introduce as much awareness into human thought as your respective cultures could accommodate. Some 5 centuries before Christ, another wave of us came and found a society in the Yucatan that was, at least at first, most responsive. In the 18th century another wave of us came, and this time, thanks largely to the printing press, we were able to stabilize certain insights in human awareness, insights that furthered the decline of aristocracies and revealed the principles of matter and energy that led to the Industrial Revolution. In 1860 another wave of us came in consciousness, to initiate vision in the oppressors and to kindle passions for freedom, justice, and equality in the oppressed. We came then as we come now, into the fields of human consciousness, riding upon the clouds, thought clouds, energy clouds, clouds of awareness, to influence human thinkers and seers, visionaries and poets, leaders, men and women who had not abandoned their love. In 1900 another wave of us came. In 1914 another. In 1929 yet another. Each time the changes we introduced were dramatic, decisive. Still, errors in judgment were made. Despite the best of our intentions, much of the change occurred too quickly. We determined in the future to allow more time for human adjustment and adaptation. We were given that time. When several waves of arriving spirit beings converged in the late 1940s, the influx of new consciousness into this Earth system encountered, thanks to the success of those who had come before, a new and unprecedented buoyancy of the human spirit. For the first time the power of arriving consciousness was matched with an equal level of human receptivity. We found open a window of opportunity, and it was open wide enough for many of us to slip in, securing places among the new generation. Though most who found such places were children still, the 1957 to 1959 awareness wave of this curious and uniquely global generation was bubbling up sufficiently beneath the surface of established human assumptions to suggest to others, older and wiser, that perhaps the gravitational hold of this planet was, after all, negotiable. Change accelerated, and accelerated again. Between the years 1967 and 1969, conceptual communication with incarnate human beings was possible on a large scale for the first time since the fall itself. The first in this present series of conceptual transmissions occurred then. All around the periphery of historical power, the consciousness of the world began to change rapidly, but the center of old world power still held. International bankers, multinational corporate executives, and leaders of governments and world religions were still surrounded with ego defense mechanisms impervious to our awareness. A decade passed, while awareness spread and deepened, working its way like ivy into every crevice of the old, divisive walls. It became more difficult for corruption and deceit to enjoy its former levels of anonymity. By the late 1970s, when the second in this present series of conceptual transmissions occurred, the new awareness was finding expression in a virtual explosion of new and revolutionary books. The influx of something unprecedented could no longer be denied. While the growth therapies and the human potential movement caught the currents of new awareness, and dressed them in the clothing of the future, the fundamentalist churches caught the same currents and dressed them in the clothing of the past. But the incoming waves of consciousness still had to penetrate the old bastions of power. These, it was prophesied, would not fall until the more powerful revelations of the late 1980s. By then, the Starseed transmissions noted, the first contractions of planetary birth would be unmistakable. The winds of change. This wave of the late 1980s is the most powerful pulsation of awareness to enter the conceptual atmosphere of human consciousness since before recorded history. And this wave, though it crested during the years 1987 to 1989, has much to yet engulf and utterly change before it is washed fully across the shores of human affairs. The greatest effects of this wave, far surpassing the events of 1987 to 1989, will come during the late 1990s and the first decade of the 21st century. Like the 1967 to 1969 period of rapid change, the 1987-1989 intensification of new consciousness has altered the world forever, but unlike that of the 1960s, this change runs deeper, it includes more than just the young, and it extends beyond the visionaries. It has reached deep into the ruling consciousness behind human affairs, injected new thought, new blood, new visions. It has taken root in new people. High upon a hill in Czechoslovakia, where yesterday stood a statue of Joseph Stalin, a replica of the Liberty Bell now rings out to celebrate democracy and to welcome in a new era of freedom. In Poland, elections bring in a new government of the people. Hungarians for the first time see inside the halls of their government, as the television lens brings their leaders into their awareness and new awareness to their leaders. The winds of 1987 to 1989 have inspired the first global reductions in conventional and nuclear weapons. They have eroded the wall that once divided Europe and Berlin and have made possible the spiritual and political reunification of Germany. They have warmed human hearts, made friends of former foes, and melted the icy rigidity that once ruled from the darkened places. They have brought radio, television, and the warmth of new awareness into the heart of yesterday's institutions, thawing the hardness of decades. The winds of change have brought freedom to millions who had forgotten how to dream. They have warmed the seeds of forgotten hopes long neglected beneath the frozen fields of fear, causing them to sprout and reach toward heaven again. They have taken men from prison and placed them at the helms of nations. They have terminated forever the Cold War. In Japan, and in the nations that border the Great Pacific, economic strength has grown beyond what anyone thought possible, bringing with it a new and promising assurance. But though the material progress of the Pacific Rim since World War II has been vast, a deeper and more important progress shows in the happiness of the people, in their heightened enthusiasm for life, in the sparkling eyes of the young. Compare what you see in their eyes today, to the eyes of people in movies and photographs, of a half-century or a century ago. We, who have long been working to change the assumptions beneath the fabric of human life, assure you that your world is rapidly being ushered into a new and long-anticipated order. It is not yet without areas of conflict, but, with few exceptions, these conflicts are themselves aspects of planetary healing. Hierarchic dominance is everywhere being challenged to release its hold, so that new and more democratic societies may be given birth. These communications of the late 1980s are having a broader and more inclusive effect than our communications of former times. They are not taking place through transmissions or channelings as much as through actual blendings, landings, what shall we call them? Incarnations, when our consciousness is able to enter human awareness, not just long enough to communicate a message, but long enough to remain and stabilize in those who receive the message. These are the awakened ones, appearing in every village, every marketplace, every university, every community and city on earth. We are the Creator's agents of decision. The lightning from heaven to earth flows through our consciousness, telepathically connecting us in currents of natural synchronistic action. The beam of energy information that shines through the center of each of our spirit identities, into our respective individualized human lives, is the same information beam that emanates from the center of the Sun, and, before that, from the center of the galactic core. Our essential spirit identity is one with our Creator, the unnameable, the Source who sends but one primal identity beam, through galaxy, star, world, and soul, differentiating like light, through crystal layers, as it flows, taking ever more specific, focused form, yet remaining one light in essence, originating in one source, one God, one Creator. We come from the stars, knowing within us the wisdom of stars, knowing the source of every star. Aligned with our innermost sense of self, flowing uniquely into our spirit lives, the eternal self individualizes. We come as a family of luminous beings, as a tribe, a light tribe. We come, awakening now in increasing numbers throughout the gentle ones, the lovers of this earth. Those in whom we awaken understand these things in terms quite different from those whom we are still courting from afar. They feel in their bones the changing of the age, and they know that it is good. As this current wave of consciousness slowly fills the conceptual atmosphere of this planet, more and more people look up from their affairs to notice that their society's understanding of the worlds is neither complete nor accurate. There are some who shrink away from this truth, but properly understood it is a source of joy and not of fear. The perspective to which we call is one of wholeness. It is the vision that sees, behind the changes of these times, an eternal presence slowly filling the fields of human consciousness, a holy presence, the presence that inspires life itself. Those who embrace this vision are both more comfortable and more effective in the arenas where human goods, services, and ideas are exchanged. Their lives are rooted in a sense of peace that weathers well the temporal storms. They use their skills and their insight to prepare the way for change in commercial and political spheres. And as this magical quarter century continues to unfold, their peace continues to deepen. How could it be otherwise? They bring peace to all they encounter. We address those locked in historical perspectives as best we can, transmitting our information through those of resonant transduction, in whom we are able to incarnate occasionally, not necessarily full-time, but long enough to create a work of art, a song, a motion picture, an article, a documentary. as electronic communication devices help to alert more people to the deeper currents of perception within themselves, our transmission of higher frequency consciousness increasingly takes the form of radiant light energy, beamed directly into human awareness. People turn again to the historically neglected flow of information through collective human consciousness, even as that flow is itself being amplified, even as its warmer, love-centered informational currents infiltrate the cooler currents of compartmentalized egoic thought. From the clouds on which some will perceive Christ riding, insight falls like spring rain upon a winter landscape, melting the snows, the prejudice, the illusions of centuries, gathering all in the water of truth and flowing on, to warm the currents of a historical river, where remnants of ideology bob, like blocks of ice, grinding against one another in the flow, melting subtly, then suddenly, away. The warm rains of new thought fall steadily upon the fields of human consciousness, bringing warmth, light, and radiant energy. Awakening individual droplets appear from everywhere, it seems, to form powerful new currents, new rivers, new streams. As more people attune to the higher frequencies of awareness, the current swells and flows. New thought, new vision, new perspectives are shared and actualized. Waters and spirits rise. An information age is released upon the world, but not before its industrial underpinnings magnify human blind spots and give to humankind unprecedented options and unprecedented power. Problems intensify. Authoritarian control grumbles. Democracy glows like a morning star. Literacy explodes in the growing light. Communication technology proliferates, stimulating, awakening, reaching deep into currents and undercurrents of human thought where but a moment ago perception was clouded and curtailed. At first there is little conscious awareness of what is occurring, but there is an inexplicable feeling, a subliminal sense of something wonderful bubbling beneath the crust of culturally enforced perception. Some associate this with a vague conception of God, but few suspect the immensity of the event that is before them as this new consciousness, aware, alert, active, flows like a tide into the very core of their societies, into their very minds and hearts. The majority of human beings have not yet thought of reality in broad enough terms to see what is happening. Their belief systems are too constricted, they allow no breadth, no scope, no room for comprehension. They find the evidence of history's direction and gathering momentum too overwhelming to consider. The possibility that human history may be reaching a climax, a completion, a moment of fulfillment, has occurred to only a few. That all that has gone before might be merely the gestational cycle of a developing planetary intelligence, is too large a concept, too broad a vision for those cloaked in cultural bias to see. However, a rapidly growing minority, with significant global influence, has sensed that there is more to current political and economic trends than is typically acknowledged by the world's societies. These people have seen flickering movements on the other side of the linguistic curtain that hangs between them and a clear view of reality. They have begun to attune to inner levels of being. These awakening individuals are not centered in any one city or nation. They do not belong to any one race or denomination. Without any linear, superficial organization, they are looking up and noticing, appearing, incarnating wherever people love. Often the initial phase of their awakening is more emotional than conceptual, but that is enough to allow the coordinated thought and sensation of unified being to flow into them and their decision-making. They may not fully understand it mentally, but they feel something, experience something. They have tapped into a new way of being, they act on it, they trust it. And it works. There are many individuals, now entering positions of global influence who are doing so, because they have sensed, often without complete conceptual understanding, that the old ways of consuming information are neither working nor necessary, that there are new and more effective methods of intuitively tapping into living reservoirs of pure information, and they are acting on intuition rather than programming. These people, without any unifying ideology, are finding themselves in strategic positions overseeing primary systems of planetary energy exchange and human social organization. This is not accidental. When the moment of quantum awakening arrives, or shortly before, they will be guided from within to act in ways that will minimize disruption of the systems that provide human populations with life's necessities. Before the moment of collective awakening, they will receive full understanding. They will know themselves as cells, terminals, there is not yet an adequate term, biologically incarnate focal points of the same awareness that brings them, and their species to life. Throughout more generations of your ancestors than you are able to remember, informational beings of the angelic orders have been moving within historical circuits, guiding the development of your cultures and your institutions. They have been influencing the evolution of your civilizational deities, filters, and prejudices, so that one day these deities, filters, and prejudices themselves would convince you to look above them, beyond them, into reality. Since some 3,000 years before the birth of Christ, the most effective components of our educational strategy have been avenues of communication related to sports, agriculture, and music. Recently physics, electronics, and other contemporary fields have also entered the picture. However, regardless of the language we speak, and each of these fields provides us with a language of sorts, our educational goals remain the same. Our task is to demonstrate the superiority of present moment, life-centered awareness, over awareness clouded by fear. We work to shift human interest gradually away from defensive, survival-oriented lifestyles and toward the pursuit of excellence. We are only able to influence people in areas where their hearts are at least somewhat open, and where a passionate interest is present. We are not interested in changing minds. Minds have always followed the passions of the heart. We are interested in opening hearts. Our educational vehicles must contrast the advantages of love-centered living, with the mediocrity of mere survival, which is the best that fear-centered living claims to offer. They must graphically demonstrate the benefits of the motivation of love, as opposed to the motivation of fear, illustrating the superiority of cooperation over conflict, negotiation over confrontation, forgiveness over revenge, present moment awareness over perception filtered through the past. They must show these as superior methods of achieving human goals and interests. Since the day when we first challenged Sumerian warriors to see who could hurl their spears the farthest, instead of hurling them at each other, we have utilized the vehicle of sports to harness the currents of human aggression and channel them into more creative activity. As human aggression is channeled into athletic competition, a subtle shift in values occurs. In many cultures it has taken generations for this shift to produce new patterns of accepted social behavior, but ultimately the shift does come. In this century, the most significant transformations in human consciousness have occurred on the playing fields of the world, in stadiums and swimming pools, on basketball courts and skating rinks, in streets, backlots, and alleyways. Here the majority of human beings first encounter their instinctual natures. Wherever human aggression can be released upon the playing field, channeled into a game of competition where skills are pitted against skills and where all abide by commonly agreed upon rules, the collective reservoir of human emotional energy releases the pent-up steam of potential violence, and that particular tendency toward violence is removed from circulation. The transmutation of aggressive energy is one of several functions served by physical sports. Another is to agree upon rules that are in the mutual interests of two opposing sides or teams, rules that are to everyone's advantage to learn and obey, a basic lesson perhaps, but a significant watershed in each individual's cycle of awakening. Team sports go beyond individual sports by encouraging players to think first of the team, the greater whole, and to help other players succeed. They call upon athletes to perfect the physical capabilities of the human body and to help others do the same. Some sports do more than merely transmute aggression. Baseball offers a state-of-the-art educational context. On the diamond, historical blind spots are penalized, while the psychological and emotional skills essential to a universal species are rewarded. Those of us who are guiding humankind through the educational processes that precede awakening, do occasionally channel our energy through the structures of organized religion, when the motives of those involved originate in love, and their intentions are for the common good. But Fatimas and inhospitals are few and far between, they are the exceptions, not the rule. Despite the best of intentions, attempts to organize spirituality almost always fall back upon themselves, masking the spirit and occasionally even flipping over to become the embodiment of whatever they oppose. By their nature, spiritual organizations are superfluous. They seek to do what is already done. A successful church is transitional, a stepping stone toward consciousness, not a rock upon which generations duplicate the mistakes of the past. To orient your life around a structure of some other human being's understanding, is to worship a false god. It is to lock yourself into a framework of someone else's prejudice, however well-intentioned. It is to prefer the past-oriented knowledge of another, to your own present moment perception. It is to doubt both yourself and the Creator who would, if you permit it, awaken within you. So it has been written, they stand in God's presence yet see only their idols. Their eyes look upon images of beauty engraved in stone and in the faces of coins, yet do not see the living beauty all around them. Those who orient their lives around human organizations are left with little happiness and less satisfaction. They are like mice on a treadmill of self-validating and self-defeating beliefs. Until they choose to step off the treadmill, there is little we can do to reach them. For they alone have the right to determine how they will understand themselves and their world, and they have the freedom to maintain the world they have chosen, however limiting. We can only shepherd such people from afar, as we have shepherded human beings throughout history, breaking up their routines when appropriate, to give them opportunities to look at the world from larger perspectives. But we cannot compel change. No lasting change is ever wrought from without. These days we find a few individuals in every community who begin to suspect that there might be something beyond their culture's understanding of reality. When this occurs, we have a breakthrough, a beachhead. These we can, and do, reach. Generally, it is then only a short time before these first to awaken translate their new awareness into terms better suited than ours, to convey it to others locked within their particular brand of illusion, thereby helping to awaken them also. In historical societies this is the prime function of art. As artistic insight gradually sifts down through the numerous layers of tradition, its essence at last reaches the level of politics. Then transformation happens rapidly, at times too rapidly. You saw something of this process at work during the American, French, and Russian revolutions. With too few awakened ones consciously involved in the process, we succeeded in lighting the fires of love for freedom, but we failed to control the flames. There are always random factors in any social upheaval, the degree of uncertainty increasing in proportion to the rate and extent of change. Disruption is not always negative. A day provides a welcome disruption of night. a star disrupts the surfaces of nearby worlds. Biological life disrupts the otherwise steady slumber of inorganic molecules. As clear currents of higher awareness flow ever more freely among human thought, the murky biases of yesterday are disrupted, loosened, and washed away. Introduce these currents we must, but always our goal is to do so as gently as possible. We release the energy of new awareness into spheres of human tradition where it is vital, but people alone, and the choices they make in their moments and hours, can determine whether the resulting transformations are graceful or traumatic. The currents of thought we bring are no more stationary than the sap of a living tree in the midsummer sun, or the pulse of a being in love. The words that have been assigned to our thought currents today may appear in printed pages tomorrow as triggers, memory catalysts, or sparks to ignite and renew awareness, but words are not truth. Truth is eternal, its verbal representations are not. They live and grow and change like the herbs and grasses along the banks of a stream, like the water flowing by. The perspectives we share in these transmissions are formulations of an eternal stream of consciousness. They are meaningful for a moment, perhaps for a day. They provide a place of understanding where you can rest, as you move forward on your homeward journey. They are stepping stones appearing before you, to take you across the stream of consciousness, from the subconscious shore, where you have floundered in the marshes and swamplands of history, to the conscious shore, where you are aware of the singularity of consciousness you knew when the world was young. As you move across the stream, you notice something strange and beautiful. Each new gain in comprehension brings a corresponding reduction of complexity. You become simpler as you become wiser, until the day arrives when once again your understanding is your own, no longer polluted with what you have been told or what you have heard, but fresh as new perception, pure as a mountain spring, clear as the guileless eyes of a conscious child.